All right, so that was our overview. We can now start talking about the end of year 1 through 4 changes for this year. So let's go ahead and just do that. And we will start with end of year 1 submission. So I've formatted this section by submission. So we'll see the changes for each submission separately. And for end of year 1, we don't have too many changes. We have some validation changes that you will see. So the conversion of the certification errors to data discrepancy errors continues for all EOY submission this year, including for end of year 1. And I will show you the full list of the converted errors for EOY 1 in just a minute. But let's talk a little bit about one data discrepancy that was modified, and is the WBLR 0649E1 fatal error. So actually, this used to be a warning previously, and the severity was changed to a fatal this year. And this is for the work-based learning type code of 10 internship. If you submit that, then the state course code of embedded work-based learning must be populated with an appropriate CTE or work experience course in this course range, right? So it's just the severity of the error that was changed. And these are the certification errors that have been disabled as a result of the conversion of them to data discrepancies now, right? And this is the full list here of all of those certifications that have been converted. So aside from the error code itself that has been changed, and obviously the processing in the backend, now they process differently, the validation logic itself has not changed. And the only exception to that is CERT 004, right? CERT 004 was a very important certification error because it looked at 3 different issues through that one certification. And sometimes that caused confusion a bit for LEA. So what they tried to do is, when they were doing the conversion this year for EOY, they split the CERT 004 into 3 distinct data discrepancy errors to address those 3 separate validations that happened. The SCNR 0716E1, this one looks specifically at the student ethnicity missing indicator and the student Hispanic ethnicity indicator, right? So if those 2 fields are not populated correctly, the SCNR 0716E1 triggers. And then there's also another scenario where if a student is missing the SINF record that overlaps with the current enrollment in the current academic year, then the SCNR 0717E1 data discrepancy error will trigger. And the last scenario is if there's an invalid student race missing indicator or student race code combination. If there's an issue with that, then the SCNR 0661E1 data discrepancy error will trigger. So this is true for all the EOY submissions, and we will see this being implemented for the upcoming fall submissions, I'm sure, as well. But the only difference will be the error codes will look different for each submission. The ending, in this case, for end of year 1, you will see E1. For EOY 2, you will see E2, etc. So there is one report change, and this is for report 18.1, and it's for all the different types of this report. One of the columns have been removed, and that is the non-registered pre-apprenticeships column, because that code of 30 was retired. So as a result of that, this report has been modified not to have that column anymore. And those are all the changes for end of year 1. End of year 2 also have minimal change. So for EOY 2, we will again continue converting CERT errors to data discrepancies, although not too many for this submission. There is one new data discrepancy error you will notice this year, SPRG 0723E2, and it's a fatal validation, and it's applied to the age of pregnant and parenting code. So the maximum age cannot exceed 19 years of age for any record that has the pregnant or parenting code of 162. And this error has not been implemented yet, but it will be coming your way very, very soon. I believe over the next 2-3 weeks. And then CERT 073, the logic was modified to include program code 192, Armed Forces program. So this warning triggers when a certain program type is not submitted. It is a warning. It will not fail your data, but in case you don't submit any Armed Forces program this year, you will see this CERT 073 triggering for them. And then CERT 004 has been disabled because it has been converted to the 3 new data discrepancy errors for EOY 2. So those are all the validation changes for EOY 2. So now it's time for EOY 3 updates. Again, continuing with the theme of the year, we will be converting the majority of EOY 3 CERT errors to data discrepancies. And again, the great advantage of the conversion is that data discrepancies are available outside of the submission window, being unrelated to the snapshot. So this allows the data discrepancy errors to process much more quickly than CERT errors being free of the revision. And we will see the full list in the following couple of slides shortly, but EOY 3 had the majority of the CERT conversion changes you will notice this year. We had one new SCNR 0719 warning, and this is for student age that should be greater than 0 and less than or equal to 22 years if the school is not a charter. So this validation warning, it existed before. If you recall SCNR 0012, that used to trigger if you had a student outside of this age range for a school. But what happened was SCNR 0012 created many system resources issues. And as a result, they got deactivated. So there was a discussion as to how to handle that. And what they did was they broke it into 2 separate new input validations. One for end of year and another one for fall 1. So you will see this in fall 1 as well. So hopefully this will work better this time and won't create any kind of system issues. We have a couple of data discrepancy errors that have been modified, and that is because NPS schools will have validations to enforce the restriction of STAS records, meaning that you will not be able to submit STAS records for NPS schools, right? So SCNR 0695E3, it will not trigger on NPS students missing the STAS anymore. And SCNR 0651E3 will actually trigger if you submit STAS records, even exemptions for NPS students, to make you aware that they should not be submitted. So that's a big change for STAS this year. And we have a number of certification errors that have been disabled because of the conversion that we talked about. And this is the full list, right? Starting with the 3 new validations for CERT 004, and the rest are pretty much the same with different error codes. And we had one change for snapshot report 14.2. The chronically absent accountability column business rules will include TK students as part of the calculations of the count for that column. And then we have some extract changes. One is a new extract for CA report 1.22. So there is a supporting report extract for report 122. And again, we started seeing these extracts in recent years because the reports themselves take a long time to refresh on the CalPass UI, or sometimes it doesn't produce any reports at all. So the workaround was to create these report extracts for you to download and look at the content of those reports locally. The cumulative enrollment extract, the CENR extract, has some new fields. It will have information for users to view calculated long-term EL start date and the data points that make up the calculations in CalPads. And this extract will have 5 new fields added to it as listed on this slide. So you will see the English language acquisition status start date, the provisional long-term English learner start date, initial use school enrollment date, K-12, earliest SENR enrollment start date, as well as the earliest EL status start date. So a little bit of a background on this. SB 141 added long-term English learners as an accountability group for the state's accountability measures. And basically, LTEL is defined as a student who has been an English learner for 7 years after their initial classification of English learner status. And there are a couple of report changes also for cohort related to this. We'll look at that in just a minute. All right, so those were all the changes for end of year 3. And moving along. So for end of year 4, there is one code set change this year, and the disability code category name and the definition has been changed from emotional disturbance to emotional disability. And as a result of this change, you will notice it will be reflected in the code sets document, as well as the valid code combinations document. And there are a couple of reports that you will see the name being changed as well in those reports. And the end of year 4 validation changes. So we have a number of new validations, including data discrepancies this year, as well as some that have been modified. Let's kind of go through this one by one. And in addition to these changes, well, obviously we will see the conversion changes from certification to data discrepancies, as noted in the first bullet here. And after that, we have a new meet validation. It's an input validation, meet 0721. And this error triggers when the pending as of date of a record that you submit is the same as the meeting date of another meet record in the same file or in CalPATS. There's a plan 0673 E4 data discrepancy. This new validation triggers to identify plan records with no SWD status records. So anytime you have a plan record, it also looks that there is a SWDS record for the student. Plan 0680 E4 was added to prevent certification of closed DSEA for end of year 4. So in other words, DSEA in the plan record must be an open LEA. And plan 0714 E4 and SWDS 0714 E4, these two validations have been added to prevent the effective start date from being prior to the student's birthday, right? So the effective start date of the plan and the special education status cannot be less than the student's birth date. So those are the new validations. And then the ones that were modified is plan 0367 E4. This one, the lower age limit of the 2 years and 9 months has been changed to 3 years old for established medical disability 1 code. Plan 0620 E4, missing eligible and participation status records for a plan record. This validation will not trigger if the SWDS status start date and plan effective start dates are the same now. So previously it used to trigger, but now it will not trigger, right? PSTS 0481. This is an input validation, and this checks the age of the SPED student and the related exit reason that was submitted in the SENR record for them. So the logic of this validation will now exclude N470 exit reason from the validation. And SWDS 0605 E4, this validation will account for new non-participation reason codes of 27, not eligible, no parental consent for initial provision of special education, and services code of 30, no longer eligible now. So there's a new cross-field validation that happens for those specific codes. And SENR 0650, invalid special education status code for enrolled student. will now include code 2, which is eligible and not participating, with non-participation reason code of 31, status and non-participation status combinations. So it has a new cross-field combination that's included. The last one is MEET 0624E4, and this is for missing special education status record. And it will now exclude evaluation type 10, 15 from validation. And there's a bit of a background on this one. So certain vendors are not able to send up a SWDS record at the time of the initial meeting record and need to wait until the parent signs the initial offer of IEP before submitting both the non-participating record and the eligible and participating record. This data discrepancy has been modified to not trigger for those initial meetings, and that's why you see that change. This is the list of the converted data discrepancies. There are a few of them, the CERT 004 and the CERT 112 and 131 that checks for the enrollment records to be closed in this year and in prior years. We also have some report changes for end of year 4. So Snapshot and SELPA Report 16.14 will have enrollment information included, including NPS school of attendance, enrollment status, enrollment start date, enrollment exit date, student exit reason, and school completion statuses. So you will see those new columns in Report 16.14. And Snapshot and SELPA Report 16.12 will also have another change, and this is cosmetic. The total unduplicated count column was retitled to total unduplicated by plan count. And the CA reports, just like the Snapshot reports that we saw previously, the revision status filter has been added to view certified SELPA approved and revised uncertified, LEA approved, not approved. So this is just keeping up with that change and updating the CA reports to include that filter now as well. Snapshot and SELPA reports 16.22 and 23. The aggregates have been updated to include student with disability statuses of 2, 3, and 4 for reporting period that doesn't overlap an enrollment. So you will see these new SWDS statuses now on these reports as well. And those are all the changes for the EOY 4 reports and validations. We have a couple of other changes that you should be aware of. When an LEA or SELPA disapproves a revision, the default status will now show either in review uncertified if they have placed any reports in review, or if that's not the case, then the most recent revised uncertified snapshot will show as default for them. And you will also notice some changes in the SELA ODS Extract modal that you will see in CalPAS. So the most recent SELA status for a student made it difficult for LEAs to look at ELAS history, which is usually needed for med resolution. The only option was to use online maintenance and look at a student's one at a time, which was very time consuming. So to address this issue, users can now request an extract based on actively enrolled SSIDs or SSID enrollment starting within a specific date range. So you have two options on the top here in the modal window when you're requesting the extract also. So you should be able to select the most recent SELA records per SSID based on the ELAS status start date, which is the default, or all of the SELA records per SSID, ELAS status, start date, or historical information, which you will see a toggle for here. So if you set this to yes, then you will see the historical information. And you will also be able to get an email notification when the extract becomes available. So for those larger LEAs, sometimes this extract takes time to be generated. And if you want to get notified when it is available, just check this email tick box in the bottom when requesting your file. So some cohort report changes, the rates and counts calculation for regular high school diploma attributes have been modified in Snapshot and CA Reports Cohort Report 15.1 to be based on graduate counts instead of the cohort counts now. And then a couple of other reports, 15.1 and 15.2 cohort reports. You will see some changes in those as well due to the implementation of phase 1 of the long-term English learner reporting that happened for EOY 3 this year, right? So we saw the changes in the CENR extract earlier. Some of those changes that you will see will be also applied to the report 15.1 cohort and 15.2 cohort student list, right? So specifically, 15.1 will have a new long-term EL yes, no filter option added to the report. And 15.2 will have that same filter along with a long-term English learner column that will have a count of all the LTEL or your LEA, right? So those are the report changes for cohort. And that's pretty much it for all the changes for all the submissions for this end of year. So certification process reminder really quickly. End of year 1 and 2 has one level of approval, which is the LEA approval, and end of year 3 and 4 have 2 levels of approval. Both the LEA and SELPA would need to approve those submissions because they contain student with disabilities information, right?